Welcome to Reaching Abundance. I'm Virginia Elder, your host. This is the podcast where you get weekly cliff notes on developing mental fortitude and podcast marketing strategies from top business owners. Ready to level up your show? Start by booking a call with me using the link in the episode description. Let's get into the episode. You've probably got a bookkeeper and a CPA, but do you have someone on your side to actually translate those numbers and strategize around them? Most financial reports are a lagging indicator of issues. In other words, by the time the numbers are down, the bull has already been in the china shop for at least a month. So, what would it be like if your very own virtual CFO helped dissect the numbers, talk through operations that could be affecting the financials, and suggest actions you can take to resolve the issues? Meet Susan Boles, owner of Beyond Margins, where she helps you build a calmer business with comfortable margins. She's all about making calm your new KPI. Susan, thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start off, like always, hearing your personal definition of abundance.
Despite the fact that I am a CFO, so most of what I do deals with finance, very little about my definition of abundance has anything to do with money. I think it's important to have enough to cover what you need to feel safe and secure. I think that's kind of a bare minimum. But to me, when I'm thinking about abundance, I'm thinking more about freedom, flexibility, and for myself specifically in my own business, calm is my watchword. I am all about running a calmer business. And when things feel calm to me, that feels very spacious. And for me, that is abundance, is that I've got enough. I'm feeling secure. I'm feeling safe. I can take care of my family and my community and my team and compensate everybody fairly and still feel like things are calm.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to be as a business owner. If you can say my business feels calm on a consistent basis, wow, you're doing things right. So you mentioned you're a CFO. Talk to us a little bit more about your virtual CFO services.
Yeah, so I am a fractional or virtual CFO. I also actually cross into being a COO. I've been both. So I tend to sit at kind of the intersection of finance and operations. And the main thing that I do with business owners is help them run calmer businesses with comfortable margins. So I'm working very diligently to make sure my business is calm. And that's a lot of what I end up doing with clients, whether that is through financial strategy or actual operational changes, because I fundamentally believe it's really difficult to make financial changes in your business without making some different operational choices. You know, a lot of the things that inform the financial implications of your business, you know, the results are often based on what is your business model? How are you delivering your services? And a lot of those things are really tied into running a calmer business. If you want to run a calmer business, you have to design it that way from the ground up. So a lot of what I do with clients crosses into business model design or financial operations strategy.
Yeah. So share with me about your services, like specifically, what does a fractional CFO do? Because I know all of us business owners are told, you know, hire a bookkeeper right away, hire a CPA right away, things like that. And I don't feel like the CFO or COO position is talked about in the same way. And a lot of times business owners are trying to be the CFO, the COO, the CEO, like all the things. And the other side of that same coin is that as a business owner, you tend to be a little bit more emotionally involved with your business than maybe a true CFO should be, would be. And that actually would allow someone to make clearer decisions for your business. So let's dive into all of that.
I am a big proponent of, yep, you need a bookkeeper and they should be really good. And your bookkeeper's role is to make sure that the data that you have, your financial transactions, gets into your systems, your books. You want to be able to have good data, and the bookkeeper is your steward of your data. Your tax professional, also super valuable member of the team. I don't do my own taxes. I have a tax accountant. They are invaluable in terms of tax advisory. But where the kind of gap is missed is on interpreting the data, in understanding the story that your finances are telling you. And that's kind of the role of a CFO in any business, is to help you understand, what are the numbers saying? How can I use that information to then make better or more informed decisions for my business going forward? I am, again, a little bit unusual. Most CFOs are pretty finance specific, and most operations folks understand finances, but tend to be a little bit more operations focused. For me, I have a really hard time separating the two of them, just generally. What makes that really powerful is where I tend to work with people is usually at some sort of growth inflection point, is the most common time that I start working with a business owner, because you don't necessarily need a CFO in your business all the time, every day. You need them when you need them. And usually that's when you're making some sort of change or pivot or decision in your business. A lot of times that's you're considering hiring an employee or transitioning contractors to employees, or you had a particularly challenging year. That's been very common this year. You had lots and lots of years where the sales were just rolling in, and then you all of a sudden things stop, and you then have to learn financial skills that maybe you didn't really need to learn when things are going well and there's plenty of money. You can make a lot of different choices without really messing anything up. But if you suddenly then have a bad year, a bad quarter, then you start to realize, oh, wait, I'm not actually actively making choices about my finances or about what I'm doing for the future of my business. So that's a really common one as well. But one of the unique ways that I tend to work with clients is with what I call a CFO intensive. So most of the clients I'm working with, that's where we start, where it's designed to answer or solve a single problem. That is frequently like, I need to hire somebody, or I've hit a capacity ceiling. What direction should I go? And so a lot of what I'm doing with clients during that intensive, it's a nice container that is designed to solve a specific problem that you can go walk away and implement the solution on your own. Or for a lot of clients, we end up working together in a more ongoing capacity after that, to implement that plan together. But it is designed to here's your plan. You could go do this on your own. And a lot of people do, because that's all they need. They just needed the strategy. They needed a little bit of education. And so a lot of what I do is teaching business owners how to kind of think about their finances, how to interpret the information, or sometimes it's how to build a model, how to build a cash flow projection. And we'll walk through and I'll talk about, okay, I'm going to build this with you live. And I'm going to talk to you about why I'm choosing a specific number in a specific area, or how I'm approaching this cash flow. So a lot of what I'm doing is actually part education and training and teaching. And my goal is really to empower business owners to then feel like they can make their own choices.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that really stinks about kind of the general culture around finances is that it's really designed to be very intimidating. And so there are so many business owners who assume they're doing it incorrectly, right? They assume they're not doing it right. They feel very disempowered when it comes to their finances. And the truth is, they're usually doing things just fine.
Okay.
For the most part, I work with business owners who do pretty good business. They're mostly experienced. They've been around for a while. And so they're doing the right things, but they don't feel like they're doing the right things because they feel like there's some secret magical something they're supposed to be doing and they're not. And so a lot of what working with a client is helping them realize that like they are actually doing all of the right stuff. They're making good choices. And my role is really to help them understand what are their values, what are they trying to achieve, because that's really different and personalized for each individual. The cool thing about the people that I work with, they're almost all service businesses.
Yeah.
So you can make that whatever you want it to be. No two service businesses are really going to look exactly alike because those founders have different priorities, they have different goals, they have different visions. And for me, that's like the coolest part is, what do you want your business to look like? And how do we make that happen so that it can feel good? You're building something that you really like that's aligned with your values. And, all of that is kind of encapsulated in what I do with clients.
Yeah. As you're sharing all of this, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, it's great to have someone who you feel is kind of like on the inside of a bunch of businesses, giving you confirmation, hey, you're doing this right. Or even if you're not, let me show you how to do this, or let me tell you what I'm thinking. Like you said, explaining why I'm putting a number in a certain place and doing some education around that, because that's how it feels for me on the inside of the podcast world, right? When I look at a podcast, I'm seeing it a certain way because I've seen 70.
You've seen so many.
Yeah, I've seen all the backends.
And you could be like, there's something super cool that these people are doing
Yes.
in a different industry or a different context. Let me suggest that to you. How about here's 5 different options of the way that you could do this.
Yeah.
What feels right to you?
And so to have someone doing that on the financial big picture of your business and helping you plan going forward, I could see how valuable that would be. You mentioned growth inflection point. I love that phrase. I'm going to write that on my whiteboard. And you mentioned, okay, maybe hiring an employee or making a big decision. Can you tell us, besides hiring an employee, what are some examples of growth inflection points when people come to you so that anybody listening can go, oh, okay, so when that comes up, this is what I need. Give us that trigger. When do we need this?
I think it looks a little different depending on what kind of business and what your approach to business is. But some of the very common ones are you're considering a shift in your business model. So maybe you've been doing all client services and you want to shift into doing a group program or delivering your services in a different way. Maybe you still like doing one-on-one client services, but you're at kind of a capacity ceiling. So you are then trying to decide, okay, cool, I have reached my max of what I can deliver either by myself or with my current team. Now I have to decide, do I actually want to grow, or do I want to make a conscious choice that this is the size and style of business that I want? So that's kind of a common one is I'm maxed out. I need to decide if or how I want to grow the business because there's lots of different approaches, right? You can reprice your services or repackage your services and still stay solo. That is a valid choice, and a choice a lot of people make is that they don't want to have a team. But you then have to figure out, do I want to grow? Am I happy where I am? Do I need to change or tweak something because I do want to grow, but I don't want to hire employees? So that's kind of a vibe of some sort of growth inflection point where we really need to start thinking about is the business model that you have the right business model? Are the services that you're offering and the way that you're offering them, is that the right model for you going forward?
Have you ever pictured yourself hosting your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we'd like to do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs and business owners launch and grow podcasts since 2019. I coach you through branding, establishing structure and workflow, and recording your episodes. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for your potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show.
Some of the other ones are really just a complete max out of capacity. Maybe you have a team, you and your team are completely at capacity and you do want to grow. And then we need to make a decision about, cool, do we want to hire more people? And if we do, what is the right role to be hiring to help alleviate some of the burden? Or do we need to focus on making what's happening in the current team more efficient and really dig into operations or service delivery style and focusing on doing what you're doing, but doing it more efficiently?
Yeah.
So those are kind of some really common ones that I frequently work with folks on. Because sometimes you don't know. And I think it's really hard to do that for yourself, to like come up with cool new ideas, or like we were talking about, you could pull ideas from different other companies or other industries or different examples to be able to implement that can be really powerful in a specific business, but it's really hard to do that for yourself. Like I can't do that for myself.
Yes.
When it's my own business, I have to go to somebody and say, hey, I need some help. Give me some ideas. Like be a me for me. But I think it can be really powerful to have an outside voice and outside perspective. I think that's where like the fractional roles or outside consultant roles can be really powerful, is just having somebody new look at it. Because a lot of the times I think we just can't think outside of that box.
Yeah. And even if, let's just say you're following various people on Instagram or something and you're seeing ideas and options there, yes, they may not know you, they may not know your business, whatever. You're getting some outside ideas, but I think your role gives a business owner an option for someone from that outside to actually look at their business and make decisions in an informed way, instead of you just getting some advice like randomly online that may or may not be good.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people, I think, do run into problems. We have this, especially if you are in kind of the online businessy kind of world or like the B2B services kind of world. We have all of these people shouting at us what worked for them or buy their 7-step program or whatever. And very rarely does implementing that for a business owner pay off, either because the tactics and ideas they worked for somebody, in 2008. That's not going to work now, right? Like if you started a blog in 2008, you're in a very different position than somebody who's starting a business in 2024.
Yeah.
The same stuff isn't going to work. But especially when you're new, you don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the experience to be able to pick what might work for you and apply it out of that framework. And so I think the benefit of working with someone who is genuinely looking at your business and your life and how you like to work and what your values and priorities are, helping you craft that into something that you genuinely want it to be, I think can be so powerful, because just having all of these outside voices shouting at you means you end up building this business. I like to call it by default. So like default decisions are decisions that you just do because you think you should or because that's just the best practice. And very rarely does that actually end up creating a business that you want to run. That's usually the scenario where people a few years down the road go, man, I hate my business. I want to burn it down and start over. But that's the result of just implementing whatever you see and feel like you should be doing versus really looking at what are your priorities? What do you like doing? How do you want to run the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So rewind with us just a little bit. You said calm is kind of your keyword, trigger, like, the word that you're always looking for.
That is my vibe.
What happened along your business journey that has made you make changes within your own business or even starting this business? Because you've had this business a while.
About 8 years.
Okay. Talk to us about that word and how it has to do with your decisions inside your life towards abundance.
For me, I was somebody who, for a very long time, was very focused on achievement. I climbed the professional ladder very quickly. I was a CFO in my early 30s and held lots of leadership positions and all of those things. I was very focused on being the best, doing it quickly, and, delivering at 150% all the time. And that is great for all of my previous employers. I'm sure they very much appreciated it. But what ended up happening was, no surprise, I burnt out. Bad and spectacularly, over and over and over again.
Oh, no.
And really spent most of my early career in this kind of burnout-bust cycle. So I started my first business in 2006. For most of that time, I had both a business and a job. So I had a day job where I was professionally in leadership roles, high responsibility roles, C-suite roles. And on the side, I was running businesses. I had a guest ranch that we owned up here in northwestern Colorado. We had a running store. Neither one of those was a great fit for us and the lifestyle we wanted to build. But what they did teach me was that if you are going to have a full-time job and you're going to have a business on the side, you have to be very, very efficient and very focused with your time, right? So I would get up at, 4 a.m. or so and work for an hour and a half before I went to my day job. I also had a very small child at the time. My son was 1 when we bought the guest ranch.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a lot on my plate. I had to be really efficient. To do that, I used technology. I learned how to use cloud software very early on, how to implement that. I was a very early user of Zapier and being able to create automations to make things happen in your business without me having to do that. The benefit of that experience, those businesses weren't great fits for me. That's not the life I wanted to have. I didn't enjoy people walking into my living room at 6 a.m. to check in while I'm there in my pajamas with my 1.5-year-old. That wasn't great. Didn't love that. But it taught me a lot of skills that when I started this business actually started as a software consultancy where I was doing that for other business owners because I had these kind of hard-fought skills about running a really efficient back end of your business that worked really well to apply to the kinds of businesses I was working with. And that kind of evolved to being fractional COO services and then fractional CFO services. So kind of all of that experience brought me to where I am now. But I was still working full time. I was still running a business essentially full time, particularly once I started the consultancy. So there was a lot on my plate. And that went great because my business was pretty efficient. It was pretty calm on the back end because I've eliminated a lot of the admin stuff. I made a lot of very conscious choices because I made some choices that didn't work out so great for me in the first couple of businesses. So when I started this one, it was very much more of a conscious choice. But when COVID happened, my son was in second grade. So we did virtual schooling for the second half of second grade and for all of third grade for him. What happened is when we started, there were 4 parents sharing virtual schooling. So he schooled with his best friend who lived 2 doors down. And so the 4 parents shared the teaching, which not a big deal. That's 1 day out of your business for everybody. That's fine. Most of us can work a 4-day work week. I work a 4-day work week now. No big deal.
Yeah.
But what happened is over the course of 2 years, all 3 other parents ended up having to go back to the office or took a full-time job that was much less flexible. And so by the end of 2 years, it was me trying to keep my business together and my podcast. I was publishing my podcast weekly at that point, rolling up on 100 episodes there. Then also now teaching full-time.
Wow.
And COVID, we were very, and still are, very COVID cautious. My husband is immunocompromised. And so, we were very isolated. There wasn't anybody to help, and everybody else lost flexibility. And I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this. When you are the person with flexibility, you end up picking up all of the other things. It was kind of the last burnout that I could bear.
Yeah.
All of those things I had, I guess it would have been 2021. I started talking to my producer about putting the podcast on hiatus. And that wasn't me. That was him going, "You're not okay. Maybe let's pause. Maybe let's calm down." But for me, it ended up being kind of an involuntary sabbatical. When my son went back to school in the fall of 2021, I basically realized that I could not keep existing like this. I was physically very, very sick, and my brain just wasn't working. Like, one of the ways in which I was sick was that my brain would not work. And so I ended up having to kind of take this involuntary sabbatical that I thought was going to be 6 months and ended up being almost 2 years before I managed to be able to come back, because it was so bad. I was so sick and so burnt out that I just could not function.
Wow.
But the nice part about kind of stepping away from my business, I mean, I was still kind of working. I took in, referral clients and that kind of thing, but I didn't market my business. I didn't do any podcast episodes. I didn't make any attempt to keep the business going. It was just, a network that I had built already that kind of came in, and I didn't turn people away, but most people knew that I was kind of out. So much slower. But the nice part about that was it really gave me time to step away from the business and really very thoughtfully think about, what do I want this to be in the future? Realizing that I need to find a way to work in a sustainable way. So I'm not doing this burnout, bust, fantastic for a year and a half, can't function for 6 months kind of cycle. I really needed to think about, how do I do this in a way that I can consistently and sustainably keep working? Coming back for me, what felt really good was keeping calm. Like, calm was the word that, like, when I thought about, what do I want this to feel like? It was calm. And that's always been kind of built into all the businesses I've had. But for me, this time around, it was something that felt like the touch point that I needed to kind of keep in mind and build around to build something calm and sustainable for myself. And then when I looked around, realized that's the goal for a lot of people. It's also not what we get inundated with from the media, from late stage capitalism. None of that is calm. It's all designed to grow exponentially, 10x everything at the expense of everything else. And I finally just realized it can't be at the expense of me or my health or what I want out of my life.
Yeah.
When I started talking about running a calmer business, and for me, one of the things I talk about is, because I'm a data geek at heart, I started out as a data analyst professionally, I'm a CFO, is that for me, I wanted to make calm something I could actually measure. I wanted to make it a KPI.
Yeah.
I am all about finding calm KPIs, making calm your new KPI. You have to have a target in mind of what you want to build. And KPIs are really powerful ways to do that. And there's a lot of unconventional, perhaps, ways to measure calm and ways to build towards having a calmer business. But that has to start from the foundation. You can't do it from, a hustle culture mentality of grow. It's never, that's inherently the antithesis of calm, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's always pushing you the way you started out, right? More, achievement oriented, scale the ladder, do all the things, kind of like no rest for the weary type of
Oh yeah.
like,
I spent so much of my life feeling guilty about resting, feeling annoyed that I had to sleep.
yes.
Like, that was something that was like so deeply ingrained in me that it took a lot of work to really unlearn all of that and realize that rest it's not a privilege. It's something that is bare minimum.
Yeah.
It should be expected. It should be the baseline, but that is not in any way how most people or kind of our general culture approaches any of that.
I agree. Could you tell us some specific steps you took coming back from that burnout and really focused on implementing calm in this business? What does that look like? How does someone do that? Can you give us some very specific tactics that someone can copy?
Yeah. I actually developed a framework
Oh, wow.
that I called the Calmer Framework. The C is for care and community. I really believe that like if you are going to create a calm business, the foundation of that is care. And that means care for yourself as a business owner, which for a lot of us is the hardest part.
Yes.
Caring for yourself, caring for your team, your clients, your community, your family, that foundation of just approaching everything in your business, being empathetic to the people in that business, whether that's neurodivergence, whether that's chronic illness, whether that's the way that they like to work, whether that's an understanding of everybody's got stuff happening outside of work. We
Yeah.
are human beings in the business. It is inherently personal and it should be human centric.
Yeah.
It starts with that foundation of approaching things from an empathetic and a care centric perspective. The A is for aligned action. So once you have a baseline of like, I'm going to care for everybody and in my business and prioritize them, you then have to align a lot of the actions, policies, your approach to business to that lens of care. And that means, considering the type of benefits you offer, thinking about what kind of leave policy you want to have, how you want to compensate people. What does that look like for you and your perspective of that caring? But you need to actually align the policies, procedures, and benefits in your business with that lens of care. L is for kind of a learning perspective. This is all iterative. We're all learning. And particularly, we're kind of having to unlearn a lot of the standardized best practices or default decisions that we get told we're supposed to have. So having a culture where you're kind of experimental, you're learning, you are trying to understand what works specifically for you, for your team, for your business, that's going to be different for everybody. Somebody who is a founder with ADHD is going to build a business that works for them is going to fundamentally look very different because the way they like to work and the kind of support that they need personally is going to look really different for them. And so making sure that you are understanding that none of this is ever going to be perfect. We're not, calm is kind of it's a messy target. It's kind of idealistic. We're never really going to be perfectly calm all the time. But if you use it as kind of your North Star, we aim in that direction. So the learning is kind of iterating towards that. M is for margin. I'm a big believer in abundant margins everywhere in your business, not just profit margins, which are certainly important, but energetic margins. How you get energy or expend energy is very unique to the individual. And being sure that you have enough margin in your energy and how you're working is really important. Things like emotional margins. If you work with clients, that is very emotionally taxing work, almost no matter where you are. Like people's businesses are their babies. They're very emotionally tied to them. And if you are working with clients, you're doing some form of emotional labor. And we all have different capacity levels there, but considering how to build margin into your emotional labor, into your capacity, into your time, all of those areas, it's really important to build comfortable margins in a lot of different areas of your business. There's a reason I named my business Beyond Margins.
Yeah. And of course, in all of that, you mentioned having a podcast. Your producer actually was insightful enough to say, hey, you're not okay. Why don't we take a break? Like, kudos to them. That is amazing to have someone on that side.
Yeah, I mean, it took him about 6 months to convince
Yeah,
me.
to convince you.
But there is definitely a benefit to having a producer who has known you a really long time and is actually a friend.
Yes. I'm trying to take care of you and not just like push the show.
Other people were seeing what was happening with me, and I could not see it at all. Being in it, one of the aspects of like being burnt out is you make really poor decisions. You don't have critical thinking. A lot of times you're in a brain fog. Everybody around me could see what was happening. I couldn't see it and couldn't do anything about it because that requires making a decision.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about starting the show, taking that hiatus, even though you felt like it was a little bit, you had to talk you into it, and then coming back even. Talk to us through that journey a little bit.
Yeah. So I started my podcast in the fall of 2019, I think. And originally the show was called Break the Ceiling. It was something that I started not because I was particularly strategic or understood what podcasting should be doing for my business. It was because I really wanted a creative outlet and I really struggled with writing. Like writing was just, my brain doesn't work that way. I'm a verbal processor. Like I want to have conversations with people to be able to process through things. And I had a friend who had suggested trying to record my audio and turn that into a blog post. That just still didn't feel great.
Okay.
That kind of evolved into, it's going to be a podcast because I want to talk as my creative medium. That makes sense. So we're just going to head down that path and see what happens. And when I originally started it, my original focus was just to do it for 6 months, to put out an episode every week, to focus on making it as good as it could possibly be, and to not pay attention to stats. Like when I started it, it was ideally designed to bring clients into the consultancy, but I was not going to evaluate it for at least 6 months because, a podcast is kind of a long play.
Yeah, I'm seeing the people who do podcasts long term and are quote unquote successful at podcasting, right? And that could be a measure of you're in the top 100 or you've been doing it long enough that you've hit 100 episodes or more. Those people generally started with a perspective similar to what you're saying, where they said, I'm just going to do this thing. My goal is to publish week after week. I'm not necessarily going to evaluate or track metrics like a crazy person, right? Like those metrics matter, but I'm going to look at them at X date into the future. Whereas the people that start trying to be really meticulous about, well, did I get a client my first month or my first 2 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and they're really focused on seeing those results a little bit immediately, those are the people who actually fall off.
And they fall off because that's not
how it works.
That's not what they're
no
goal
matter
is.
how
yeah,
much.
it is a long-term play, no matter who you are.
Yeah, and no matter how much we have conversations where I'm explaining that and talking about what that would look like, if that is their mindset at the beginning, I cannot change it.
Yeah.
It does not work that way, and they end up falling off. So how did you start with this really open mindset about, I'll look at metrics down the road. I just want to just do this.
I think it was because the people I went to help me start my podcast, before I started the podcast, I actually had a conversation with her.
Okay.
At that point, I think she'd been doing 200 episodes. Like she had a lot, and she was publishing 4 or 5, like some insane amount of times per week.
Yeah. Like a well-oiled publishing machine here. Yeah.
But actually sat down and talked to her about, hey, I want to start a podcast. What should I be thinking about? How should I be thinking about this? And she really tried to talk me out of starting a podcast.
Wow.
Which was so powerful because she really made me aware, like, this is something you got to do for a long time. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of just little steps, even working with a producer where they're doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. It's just a lot. Understanding how much work goes into putting in each episode. I mean,
yeah.
I think each episode takes me about 4 to 5 hours to produce. And that's not the editing part. That's me thinking about it. And I work in content themes. So I have to find specific guests for specific stories, which takes a lot longer. And each episode is probably a third a solo episode because I'm framing what we're talking about. So she sat me down and was very explicit about this is going to take a long time. Don't look at statistics. Because honestly, in 2019, like things are a little bit better now. But in 2019, nobody really had any good numbers about anything anyway. Like the statistics were so hard to get to or inaccurate. Like
Terrible.
looking at download numbers didn't tell you much at all other than are they going up or are they going down? That's about all you could get. It's not quite the same, I don't think, as it is now, where you can get a lot more of that detail. It's still not perfect, but that just wasn't available.
Yeah.
So I had to set my own internal metrics about, and I'm not saying I went into starting my podcast with wide open eyes or anything. I really didn't fundamentally understand where it should sit in kind of the marketing funnel. I was expecting it to be a discovery platform. It's not a discovery platform. Basically what happened is I had a conversation with Tara and she told me it had to be long-term. It had to be a long-term investment or it wasn't worth doing. She explained how much work it really was and made me understand the kind of commitment I should do this. And I think those fundamentally helped me, especially as a data person, let go of the fact that I'm not really going to have good data about this and set some other, I guess they were calm KPIs at the time. I didn't realize that, but I decided to, on my, when people book a sales call, I ask them how they heard about me. Podcast is one of those. That's how I tracked where are leads coming from. I decided I wasn't looking at any metrics or making any decisions about whether to continue the show or not. I wasn't looking at it at all for 6 months. I was just focusing on get good at the show, be a better interviewer, be more comfortable, tell better stories for 6 months. And then at 6 months, what happened is I started to have people unsolicited tell me how good the show was. Or, I would join a new community and people like, oh, I listen to your show. That's great. Those were the second metric that I was looking at. My friend Jaya Kunzo has something he calls the unsolicited response rate, which I love because it's like the perfect calm KPI, where basically he judges how effective his emails are on how many unsolicited responses he gets and how emphatic they are. Like he has a scoring system. My unsolicited response rate was people saying, I love the show. Tell me about the guests. I listened to 18 episodes. I binged the whole catalog. Those were the kind of metrics I was actually looking for versus download numbers. Because my show is kind of geeky. It's mostly about finance and operations for service businesses. It is
Sounds amazing.
Going to be the next Joe Rogan. It's a great show for the people that it's a good show for.
And that's all it should be.
But it's niche. It's not going to be a top 100 show ever. Even if I captured the entire market for my podcast, that's still not that many people. So I had to think about it in a different way, approaching the show and how I was going to evaluate whether or not it was successful.
I love that the almost forced lack of data allowed you to approach it from this different mindset. It was beneficial, actually.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you said, I want to do this for my own reasons, not because of data.
Yeah, totally.
That works with anything, right? Whether we talk about health or business or any new endeavor. I think the easiest comparison that everybody is aware of is any kind of workout or food plan that you're trying to do. It's so much better if you focus on non-scale victories.
Yeah, totally. And I think
it feels better.
That is kind of the essence of calm KPIs, are things that they're qualitative measures that you can quantify.
Right.
But at the heart, they are, is this thing successful or not? And the definition of success for any project or a business or a person, it's going to be really individual.
Yeah, very much like your definition of abundance.
Totally.
Perfect. You brought it full circle for
Full
us.
circle, wrapping it around.
Tell me real quick, you made a comment about when you started, you didn't quite understand the podcast's positioning in the funnel as a discovery platform versus not. So share what you've learned and where you feel your podcast sits in the funnel at this time.
I think in the interim, there is becoming a much better discoverability platform around podcasts for sure. In the last several years between YouTube and stuff like Podroll and being able to recommend other podcasts and multiple platforms.
I agree with you.
I still don't think it's going to be the same like discovery platform as like social media or YouTube, perhaps. Where the podcast has always sat for me is kind of in the nurturing phase. So instead of discovery, it is a relationship platform. It's something that's very intimate because people are sitting here right now listening to both of our voices in their heads for, 30 minutes, an hour. And if you have a show that you love, you really become very familiar and intimate. Like it's an intimate relationship because they're literally in your ears all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Where it works really well is not necessarily in finding clients, but in closing clients. When people have listened to several episodes, which is pretty common on my show, they'll listen to, at least the theme, because that's normally about 4 episodes. They come in, They know me, they know my perspective. They're basically warm referral, essentially, leads. It is a methodology that helps me build a relationship with the people I'm talking to, but also for potential clients allows them to build that trust, that expertise, that relationship that if they were just coming in cold, you wouldn't have. So for me, it's really a nurturing relationship building platform.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. For some people, like you said now, especially with YouTube, now YouTube has kind of like taken over the world as far as podcast discoverability and even now consumption. It's turned out that people are consuming podcasts on YouTube more than Apple or any of these other platforms. So it's just been a wild shift over the past couple of years, but I love that perspective of, hey, maybe the show isn't working for client acquisition, but client nurturing might be a better perspective. And it's very much like financial services or anything. It may be different for every business, and you have to figure out what's working for you, what's right for you.
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. And when I decided to bring the show back, I did it with a lot more knowledge about where it really should kind of sit in my overall marketing strategy, what it can do and can't do for me. And so I brought the show back, I rebranded it so it matched my new business brand. So they're both Beyond Margins. So it was all kind of under one platform, which is really nice, versus having the show titled something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't actually change the format or who I was talking to because I really loved the format. So for me, I repackaged it, but I came back with a lot more experience and understanding, one, of what I was committing to when I brought it back. Like I knew how much work that was going to be, and I knew that I had the capacity to bring it back. I resisted it for a long time, which was really hard for me because I love the format. I love the creative outlet. For me, like podcasting is where my heart lives. And it was very difficult because the CFO side of me really needed to know that I had a solid strategy and reasoning behind putting all this time, effort, money into this thing. I really needed to be very clear on what it should be doing for my business and where it should sit in the overall kind of strategy. And so coming back, the show itself didn't change that much.
Yeah.
The packaging, the front door changed a little bit. But my understanding of how to use the show in my business was much stronger and more strategic, I think.
I love that. Well, and I think that works anytime we start a new endeavor, take a pause, get a fresh perspective on it, and then come back. You've done that with multiple businesses. You've done that with the podcast, and you're able to actually do that as an outside perspective for other people's businesses. And I think that's just so valuable. I think that's why we need that outside perspective often.
Agreed. Yeah, totally.
So, Susan, tell us where we can find you and follow you and listen to your show and hire you for CFO services.
Yeah, so I mostly on social hang out on LinkedIn, a little bit on Threads. So I'm the Susan Boles on all of the social platforms. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love hanging out with people on LinkedIn. My website is beyondmargins.com, and the podcast is also called Beyond Margins, and you can listen to that wherever you like listening to podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your story about your show and everything. It's wonderful.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'd love to hear which piece of this conversation meant the most to you today. Head to reachingabundance.com/convo. If you're ready to market your business effectively with a podcast, let's talk. Click the Book a Call link in the description and I'll take it from there. Thanks for listening to Reaching Abundance. I'm Virginia Elder, and I'll be back next week with another insightful episode for you. Follow me on Instagram @podcastabundance to stay connected in the meantime.